Hello and welcome to the special support section of Melee's Turnwheel, the sub-series dedicated to discussing the many supports of the Fire Emblem series. I'm your host, I'm Melee Kirby, and today we are looking at the Mercenaries who join Roy in Chapter 2 of Fire Emblem The Binding Blade, including Lot, Wade, Deke, and Shanna. Possibly in that order, I'm not sure yet. But anyway, sorry it took so long to get this episode out. I have been putting it off, not because I don't really want to talk about it, but because I've been mostly playing Fire Emblem Engage, to be honest with you guys, which I do plan on making a bonus episode about my thoughts on Engage when I finish it, which I should finish it within the next couple of days. I don't know when that episode will be out, but yeah, look forward to that. I have a lot of thoughts on it, and I want to, probably nothing like super long, maybe like, half hour, 45 minutes, just talking about how I feel about the game, my initial thoughts after completing one playthrough. And yeah, I mean, that's the only Engage content you're going to get for like 6 years. So I hope you enjoy it. But getting ahead of myself, I do plan on recording this episode and also the next I'm going to have to get used to that. The next SSS episode, back to back. So hopefully those two shouldn't be too far apart from each other. And then, of course, the next main episode will be coming out, as usual, on the weekend of what would that be? No. We're going into February. Fuck it. I can't do math across months. But yeah, soon trademark. So yeah, you have potentially up to 4 episodes to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully you guys enjoy that. So that's enough beating around the bush. We are going to go ahead and start our discussion of these characters with Lot. Lot has 5 support partners, most of which are also going to be in this episode. He has a support with Deke, Wade, Shanna, and then he has one with Lance, who we already looked at, or we looked at that support in the last SSS episode. And then he has one with Echidna, who is a character who we'll be meeting in the next main episode. So we're going to talk a little bit about her here. So let's just go ahead and start with some familiar territory and talk about his Lance support. Now, if you remember, his Lance support kind of goes into their shared interest in like strategy and the tactics of battle. They talk a little bit about the weapon triangle. They play some strategy game together, chess basically, fantasy equivalent, Fire Emblem equivalent of chess. And then their ace support kind of talks a little bit about how even though they're in a disadvantageous position strategically, Lance still has faith in Roy to, pull ahead and secure a victory. Now, I have to say, this support definitely does a lot more for Lance than it does for Lot. The most I can say for Lot is that I had honestly forgotten that he wasn't just the stereotypical meathead. He's definitely the calmer of the two axe bros. That general, axe bro dynamic. You got the Bartray and Dorcas. You got Board and Cord. You got who else? Actually, is that it? No, that can't be it, right? Because nowadays, it's usually only one axe bro right at the beginning. Well, you get my point. He's there's always this dichotomy of like, one of them is a little bit more laid back, and Orson and Halvin, those are the other ones. Yep, okay, that was it. One of them is usually a little bit more laid back, one of them is a little bit more fiery and, hot-headed. Lot is the more laid back one. And maybe it's just because, I haven't really read any of the supports for these guys. But I kind of just expected the more laid-back axe bro to also be not necessarily stupid, but like, this guy's smart. He is on par intellectually with a knight who has been trained for presumably years, to be a good strategist, and he's matching him. He's matching him in a battle of wits across a few of these supports. So that's pretty cool. It kind of subverted my expectations of what I was thinking Lot would be like. But past that is really nothing special. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the next support, which is his support with Deke. this support is really simple. It almost feels like, and I think a lot of supports are like this in FE6. I noticed this in the last episode as well. It feels like the beta version of or the Cliff Notes outline of what a more modern support would be. It hits like the big points, the big bullet points, and it gets across like the gist of what's being said. But it doesn't really do anything. There's no like introductions. There's no like fluff, and to a certain extent, I kind of respect that. But it is a little bit jarring, being used to some of the newer supports. His Deke support just sums that up really well. Like C support is just talking about Roy, and how he seems to be a good leader, but they're just they're concerned about his level of experience. B support is just mostly focused on Deke backstory and saying like he was. We can talk more about this when we get to Deke, I guess. But he was working for a guy who left him for dead. Basically, he purposefully sent them in as a decoy to buy himself time, and then Deke, all of his companions died. Deke was the only one who lived, and he, instead of being killed, was tortured. Although he did manage to escape alive. But they kind of muse about how Roy is different, and he doesn't seem like that type of person. And then the A support is just them kind of talking about a little bit about their perspective as mercenaries, how mercenaries are kind of usually supposed to care about money and nothing else really. That is a little bit contradictory, because Ilian mercenaries are said to be extraordinarily loyal. So I don't know what that's about. The support seems to contradict the lore we already have, but that's pretty nitpicky. And then they both say that they feel like Roy is someone who they could die for and feel comfortable doing it, which is sweet. It's definitely more of a Deke support. I'll give it that, but still nice nonetheless. Shows that Lot kind of is a nice guy. He likes Roy. He kind of warms up to Roy immediately. Oh, a note here, and I think Wade and possibly also Shanna do this. He refers to, in the English script, he refers to Deke as bro. And this is a very interesting... I don't really... Like, it's not my forte. I don't know any Japanese, really. But I do like talking about certain quirks of translation, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here. I have not read the Japanese script, but I would put $1 million on the fact that in Japanese, where he says bro, it's probably meant to be aniki, or aniki. And basically, that doesn't really have a great English equivalent. It's often translated to bro, but I think probably the closest you could get in English would be like the slang term boss, like, hey boss, what's going on? That kind of thing. And I just always thought it was weird how that gets translated as bro. This is not the only translation to do it, not by a long shot. Many English translation or official English translations of games in anime change aniki to bro, and I just never really got why. But like I said, there's not really a good English equivalent. So anyway, tangent over. This support isn't very good for Lot either. It's alright, I guess. I'm trying to draw blood from a stone. It's not looking good so far for Lot. Now, the Wade support actually turns things around a little bit. It's a pretty good support for both of the guys. First of all, it's not made explicit until the A support, but it's pretty heavily implied immediately that Lot and Wade are from the same village, they're from the same hometown, and they know each other pretty well, and they know each other's families pretty well. They're kind of just bickering about, Wade being a little bit too reckless, and Lot says, Mary asked me to protect you, and that is apparently Wade's sister, and Wade kind of gets embarrassed. The B support, they talk about Lot's mom. Wade says, oh, you need to buy some medicine for your mom, but then Lot tells Wade that his mom actually passed away, and he and Wade argue a little bit about how Lot should probably go home, because he has a younger sister. That one, I don't think that's made explicit. But some kind of, family relationship. who is now alone without his mother. And Wade is like, "Oh, you should go home." But Lot refuses and says, I need to see this job through to the end or something like that. And then the A support, they just kind of like resolve to make sure that they don't die. They're going to keep each other safe and they're going to make it back to their hometown together. And we're not going to talk about this for a little bit, but we do actually visit their hometown on the Western Isles in Chapter 10B. So I'm very excited to talk about that. They have unique dialogue in some of the houses there. So yeah, that will be something that comes up. But I just think that's really cool how they write a backstory for these guys and then they like integrate it into the world and into the game itself. That's pretty neat. And I like that. So overall, pretty good support for Lot and Wade there. We're going to be saving a lot of time when we get to the other guys because I'm going to be able to skim through a lot of the supports. This is why I kind of wanted to do like a bunch of the similar guys together. For the fact that when we get to the Wade support, I can kind of just like jump through it real quick and talk about how it applies to Wade. All right, so next up is Shanna. The Shanna support is really cute. If you can't tell, I'm actually pausing the episode and going to read these like in real time. But obviously I'm going to cut out all the downtime. Now, the Shanna support is very cute. Lot is kind of giving her tips on how to survive in battle. Shanna complains that he's kind of being a worrywart. And then in the B support, they talk a little bit about how Lot has a sister. So I guess that answers my question from before. Lot has a very young sister. Only he says she's not even 10 years old yet. And so Lot kind of like Shanna reminds him of her. So he's making a concerted effort to help her stay safe. And then in the A support, they just, they bond a little bit more. Shanna refers to him as her big brother, and that's cute. It's pretty good support. Won't say it's anything groundbreaking, but, probably the best one so far. I'm starting to think that Lot maybe just isn't a very interesting character, but, it is what it is, I guess. And finally, the Echidna support is actually pretty good. This one is probably my favorite Lot support overall. So for context, Echidna is another character from the Western Isles alongside Lot. Now, the interesting thing about this, and it doesn't really come up in the support, but I think it helps add context. Echidna is exclusive to the A route. And if you remember, I mentioned earlier that Lot only visits his village in B route. So you cannot have him support Echidna in any scenario where he also visits his home village, which isn't particularly pertinent. I just think it's interesting because they do talk a little bit about his village here, and it comes up a couple times, some of his backstory with Wade. But yeah, so the C support has them kind of meeting each other, and Echidna telling Lot that she wants to build a village in the Western Isles for the people who lost their home during the war. And Lot says that that's a really good idea, but in the B support, they start talking. He's like, "Do you have the money for this?" And she's like, "Well, no," but details. And they talk a little bit about a mine where they might be able to get some money. And the A support, they have a nice little interaction where, Lot gives her some of her backstory. Throughout the support, especially in the C and A supports, Lot is very preoccupied with the fact that he might die, because, it's a tough battle, and he doesn't want to make any empty promises, if he's gonna end up dying. So he ends up telling Echidna, I don't want to die. I don't plan on dying because I have a sister back home to take care of. And Echidna, I'm pretty sure, I haven't obviously read any of Echidna's supports yet, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, one of the main through lines throughout all of Echidna's supports is that she is a terrible people person. She has like zero emotional intelligence. So there's a fun gag in here where she's like trying to cheer him up. And the way it comes out is basically she says, "Oh, well, if you die, don't worry about it because I will take care of things for you. I'll make sure that your family is taken care of. So you can go ahead and die without any worries now." And he realizes what she's trying to do and just thinks that it's kind of weird. But it's cute. It's funny. I like this support quite a bit. And I think that if it was, if this level of quality was consistent throughout all of his supports, I'd have a lot of different things to say about Lot, but unfortunately I don't. So, oh well, I guess. So that's Lot, a pretty mundane character overall. I do think, the through lines of his sister being relevant across multiple supports. I think the preoccupation with possibly dying and not being able to make it home is interesting and adds some texture to his character. But overall, I wouldn't say that he's one of the Binding Blade's more standout cast members. But he's fine, well enough. I've definitely seen worse characters. So yeah, that's a lot. So let's go ahead and move on to his partner in crime, Mr. Wade. Wade has also 5 support partners, 2 of which we've seen already. We've seen the Alan support in the last episode. We've seen the Lot support earlier in this episode, and then we've also we're about to look at, in addition to those 2, the Deke support, the Shanna support, and he also has an Echidna support. So he actually has the exact same support partners as Lot, except you flip Alan for Lance, I guess, for Lot. So yeah, starting off, let's quickly revisit the Alan support. Yeah, it's just them training, them having a combined 1 brain cell is very entertaining, and they kind of burrow out together, and it's pretty cool. But nothing here really worth talking about for either of them. I'm pretty sure this was one of the weaker Alan supports as well, so not much really to say about it. His Deke support is cool and fun, mostly for Deke. I think it adds some layers to his character. For Wade, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, all it is Deke sees that Wade is kind of being reckless in battle. Deke tells him to not do it, to be a little bit more aware of his surroundings. The B support is kind of funny because Wade just literally can't even remember what Deke said to him the first time. So Deke has to repeat it. And then the A support is Wade kind of getting a wake-up call about, he almost dies in one of the battles, and he realizes that he was being too reckless and is going to take, Deke's advice. And that's really all there is to it. I think for Deke, again, we'll talk more about it for Deke's side of things when we get to him. But I do like it for Deke, at least a little bit. But for Wade, it's funny, I guess, to see just how much of a scatterbrained he is. But other than that, nothing really worth mentioning. Next is the Lot support, which we've already seen. I do like the support. Again, I like this for both of them, because I think on Wade's end of things, it really, he's very blunt. He's very, he says what he wants, and damn the consequences. And I think that you can tell, just the way these 2 are written, you can tell that they've known each other for a really long time because they bounce off of each other really well. Lot is clearly used to being the cool, calm, and collected one, helping Wade out of tight situations. But then on the other end of things, Wade is going to be the one that calls Lot out on his bullshit. In the B support in particular, when Wade finds out that his mother is dead, or that Lot's mother is dead, he says, Lot, you're more stupid than I thought. And Lot says, maybe so. So I think Wade, and he have a really good relationship. He's the one who's going to say what needs to be said, whether Lot wants to hear it or not. I know I'm reading a lot into that, but I definitely don't think it's too much of a stretch, because that definitely comes across as the dynamic that they have with each other. The Shanna support is really good, and I think that looking at the Lot Shanna support and the Wade Shanna support next to each other really highlights how similar and different they are at the same time. It's very similar in concept. Wade is worried about Shanna because she's, being a little bit reckless in battle. And in fact, it's really interesting because despite Wade being consistently, every single person, I think Alan did it in his support, Lot is doing it, Deke is doing it, everyone is telling him to cool off. Wade, for the Shanna support, is the voice of reason, and he says, you need to stop charging in without thinking. So I think that that's some good characterization, because it shows that Wade is capable of thinking about these things. He is aware of what that looks like, and either he's just not thinking about it for himself, because it's just not occurring to him, or maybe he's intentionally avoiding thinking about it because he mentions in the Deke support that it just doesn't sit well with him. I think it comes up a couple other times too. That's just not his preferred method of fighting. But he is definitely able to recognize when it's a problem. And I think that that's cool. And then of course, Wade is much less, like he's much more of a jerk about it. They're kind of like, Lot is kind of the overprotective big brother. Whereas Wade kind of meets her at her level and kind of, it's almost like they're two children bickering back and forth. And I mean, Shanna literally is a child. So, that's fair enough for her, but Wade is I think a grown man. So it's definitely not as understandable for him. But they bicker back and forth, but it's clear underneath it all that he genuinely cares about her. And in fact, in the A support, he kind of like lets it slip a little bit that he's worried about her, and Shanna kind of teases him for that. It's cute. I like it a lot. I like it about as much as the Lot Shanna support, but for different reasons, basically. So the Echidna support for Wade actually follows very similar to the Shanna support, follows the exact same beats as the Lot version. And on the one hand, I don't know how I feel about that because I do think it's a little bit lazy. Maybe lazy is too harsh of a word, but it definitely feels like looking at these two back to back, they were clearly like, all right, we're going to take this template and you just use it for both, because they are pretty similar. So I can't exactly blame them, but I honestly kind of like it at the same time because I do think it's cool to see, like I mentioned with the Shanna support, how these two differ and when put in very similar circumstances. So Echidna approaches Wade and just like Lot, asks him to help her with this village. But unlike Lot, who agrees right away, Wade says no. He just straight up says no. And then Echidna tries to tries to basically say, oh, you want to do it. Come on. I know you're going to help me out. It's funny, Wade's kind of getting pissed off. And then Echidna tries to, in the B support, tries to talk him out of being a mercenary by saying you might die at any time, which is interesting because when Lot was bringing that up in his support, he was saying I might die at any time. She was kind of trying to get him to ease up a little bit and to not be so down on about the situation, which I don't really know what that says about Echidna's character. I guess we have a little bit before we need to think about that, but I don't know. It's just worth mentioning, I think. And then Wade kind of tells the same cave story about the snakes. Actually, I don't know if I even mentioned that in the Lot support because it was very incidental there. But yeah, they when they were a kid, they checked out this cave, and Lot says, Wade went in and got scared by some snakes and left. But the way Wade tells it, he went in and killed some monsters. And was a big brave warrior, killing a bunch of monsters. And I think it's funny too because theoretically, you could have Echidna get to a B support with both Lot and Wade in the same playthrough. So it's really funny to think about, her hearing the story from Lot and then going to Wade and hearing the exact same story and being like, all right, you're full of shit. I mean, she knew that he was full of shit anyway. It's funny, and this is, I don't know how often this is going to come up, but I think it's worth talking about. Monsters in Fire Emblem is honestly an interesting subject because it's honestly like a split down the middle. Maybe not quite down the middle, but it's a pretty even split between the Fire Emblem games that have genuine actual monsters and the ones that don't. Now 6 is one of the ones without monsters, but if you have played Engage or Awakening or Three Houses or Gaiden or Echoes or Sacred Stones, and maybe even a couple of the others, you would be forgiven for thinking that monsters were just like a staple of the Fire Emblem universe. But they're really not. Monsters don't exist in every game, and they don't exist in this one either. So it's really easy to forget that when Wade says, I killed a monster, Echidna is just obviously going to assume that he's full of bullshit. Although, to be fair, in most of those games, monsters aren't really normal in the same way that they are in, like, D&D or whatever, because they're being caused by, like, current events going wrong in the world. But that's neither here nor there, I guess. So anyway, the Echidna support is pretty alright, and this episode is already going way longer than the other one. It's going to be pretty long, I think, but that's okay. Wade's an alright character. I like his supports on average a little bit more than Lot's, although I do like them about equal, when they're, the Shanna and the Echidna supports, when they're being, put side by side like that. It's neat. I like it. Next up is Deke, and Deke actually has 6 support partners. Lot and Wade, who we've already seen. Shanna, to be expected. And then a few characters who, we've kind of, I think we've talked about 2 of them. Oh, it doesn't matter. The remaining support partners are Clarine from Chapter 4, Rutger, also from Chapter 4, and then Klein, who is a character who we will be meeting in the next main episode. So yeah, a lot of supports to get through on this one. So let me just quickly go through the Wade and Lot ones. I mentioned that I liked the Wade support for Deke more than I liked it for Wade. And what I meant by that was it's genuinely pretty sweet to see how much Deke cares about Wade. Wade has been, we're going to talk a lot about, he's had a pretty rough backstory. If all the scars on his body weren't enough to tip you off. But Deke's had a pretty rough lot in life. No pun intended. But he's made it finally with this new mercenary company that he's in charge of, and the remaining 3 guys really look up to him, and you can tell that he is genuinely invested in their safety. Lot is kind of like more at his level intellectually. So he doesn't necessarily need to, babysit him in the same way. But with Wade, he wants Wade to stay safe. And I think that that's very sweet. It's pretty mundane compared to most of his other supports, but I do think it's worth mentioning. And then the Lot support is, we already talked about it. It's just more backstory about how he was left for dead and then tortured. Standard stuff, the usual. But no, moving on to Shanna. The Shanna support is quite similar to the Lot and Wade versions, at least at the beginning, where he is kind of like teaching her lessons about how to be a mercenary. I think it's really interesting to see how Wade kind of messes it up a little bit by making it too personal and being kind of a dick. Lot is very much, he's a little bit too overbearing, whereas Deke really kind of gets it, I think, a little bit more than those other 2. And he doesn't necessarily, scold her or lecture her. He tries to teach her, and to give her guidelines, provide examples, explain to her, the logic behind what he's thinking, rather than the other 2 who kind of just say, do it. And I think that's pretty cool. It shows a difference in their personalities and and it gives pretty clear indication of why he is the leader. Now, the A support is a little bit sweet. It's honestly very sweet. He basically tells her that she shouldn't trust people too much, because it's always possible that, he explains that this is kind of a good guideline for being a mercenary. It's always possible that people are just trying to use her, and he says, just for an example, it's possible that even I'm just giving you orders to try to save my own skin, basically. And she immediately dismisses that idea and says, you wouldn't do that. I know it. Lot and Wade know it. Like, we trust you completely. And we, we feel like we can entrust our lives to you. And Deke doesn't really have a way to respond to that, but it's very touching. I like Shanna a lot. We're going to talk about her in a bit. But I think the consistent theme throughout all of her support so far has just been that she's just so genuine. And she brings to you what you bring to her, I guess. Like if you're kind to her and you show her respect, then she's going to do the same to you. But if you kind of want to bicker with her like Wade, she's going to meet you at that level too. It's sweet. I like Shanna. But this isn't about Shanna. This is about Deke. I think that it's an interesting perspective from Deke here. And going hand in hand with the lot support, we can very easily see why he might say something like this. He has been betrayed by his employer in the past, and knows what that feels like. And so he's kind of trying to give her a lesson on how if you're a mercenary, you can't be too careful, and you really need to be sure not to trust anybody. And Shanna, I like to think Shanna kind of challenges that perspective, because what Shanna basically says to him here is that, no, there are people that I can 100% put my faith in. And I think Deke has probably not felt that way in a long time. I'm basically writing my own fan fiction at this point, but I like to imagine that, this stirred something in Deke a little bit. For someone who's been burned his whole life, it's probably not a thought that he's had in a really long time. Like, oh yeah, it is possible for me to fully put my faith in somebody. And as much as it's not, highlighted as much, but again, in the lot support, when he starts thinking about Roy as being someone trustworthy, you can kind of see how in this support, or rather, once you read the support, you can kind of see how that's, a pretty big step for him, realizing, hey, this guy is someone who I could fight and die for and feel like I made a good decision. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. Now we go into I would say the main backstory supports. At least two of these are. So his support with Clarine is up next. This one's just funny. It does give him a little bit of backstory, but I don't think it's anything that you wouldn't get from reading the Klein support. Basically, Clarine is, following him around. He kind of annoys her. he's talking, mad shit or whatever. Gets her upset, but then he lets it slip that he knows her father and her brother, Pent and Klein. Now, if you've played FE7, then you would recognize you would most definitely recognize that name as being one of the characters in FE7. But for now, and honestly, if you aren't very far in this game yet, you probably won't recognize Klein either. But obviously Clarine thinks it's a little bit weird that this guy who she has no idea who he is knows her father and her brother. So basically she tries to just bug him into telling her, and it doesn't work until the A support. The B support is basically just filler. We can skip right over that. But the A support, he basically explains that he worked as a pit fighter for their family, and through some circumstances that we don't know at this moment, he saved Klein's life. And apparently his family, Klein included, Pent and Louise, her mother, were just ranting and raving about this guy, about how cool he was, and how apparently Clarine heard a lot of great things about him. And Deke doesn't really have a response to that. I would imagine he probably wasn't expecting that. Especially since, when she says, you say my brother's life, he's confused and says, who told you that? And she says, well, everybody did. So pretty cool, pretty interesting, but yeah, it kind of just seems like a watered down version of what I assume the client support will be like, but I haven't read it yet, so I guess I could be wrong. But before we get to Klein, we are next going to talk about his support with Rutger. Yeah, so the Rutger support is more backstory for Rutger, although it does have a couple cool moments for Deke. So the C support, Deke and Rutger are kind of sparring with each other, or I guess Rutger is trying to spar with Deke, and Deke isn't having any of it. But Rutger says, you're the only one who's strong enough to give me a challenge, which I think is cool. I love power scaling. I don't know if it's ever come up before, but I do like power scaling a lot, especially with properties I'm very familiar with. So whenever I see stuff like this, I'm like, write that down. Deke is on the same power level as Rutger. But yeah, it's just a little fun to see support. The B support, Rutger talks about how they met a guy on the battlefield, who led the attack on his hometown. If you remember, when we recruited him in Chapter 4, we found out that he had a personal vendetta against Bern, and it turns out that the reason for that is because Bern attacked his hometown. Bulgur, which is a place in Sakai, and they killed everyone, basically, and Rucker was the only one left alive, because I guess he's mixed. He's part Bern, part Sakayan, and they thought he didn't look like a Sakai native, so they let him live, and killed everybody else, which is really messed up on a lot of levels, for obvious reasons, but I'm going to talk more about that when we eventually do Rucker. But for now, just focusing on Deke. So the context is that they fought the guy who led that attack. It's some nameless generic guy, or maybe it was a boss. I don't know. I mean, it's not given a direct answer. But he apparently led the attack on the village, and Deke says, sorry, if I had known, I would have left him for you. Rucker, kind of dismisses him, but Deke expresses concern for his safety, or for his like mental well-being, I guess. And then in the A support, that kind of continues, whereas Rucker isn't feeling well. He hasn't been sleeping well, and Deke kind of picks up on that and asks him about it. And then Rucker kind of like lets the floodgates open, and like he had already told Deke about the village being destroyed, but this is kind of where it all comes flooding out about the actual like details of the attack and how he lived, and he's being very emotionally vulnerable here, which is not common for Rucker, so it's interesting. And then Deke kind of offers his hand and says, I'm gonna help you. I'm going to be your partner in your revenge against Bern, basically. So they kind of team up, and decide that they're gonna fight together, and that's cool. It's a good moment for Deke. I think Deke consistently is just shown to be a very naturally caring person. He tends to enjoy. I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but he has a tendency to look out for people, and to know when people are not in their peak, and to kind of like guide them to, being the best that they possibly can be. So I think Deke is very much, he puts on this facade of being kind of like, I mean, he is strong. I guess I can't think of how to word this. Especially in the Rucker support and in the Clarine support as well, he definitely puts on this facade of like not caring and being very detached. But when it comes down to it, he is a genuinely kind, caring person, and I think that really shows in most of his supports. And we're gonna probably see it again in the Klein support that we're about to read, because obviously we've already established that he saved Klein at some point in the past. So let's go ahead and talk about that one. Okay, so the Klein support is pretty good. I am going to be that guy and complain about some stuff when we eventually get there, but for the initial part, I would say the C and B supports are pretty good. They reunite, basically, Klein and Deke like realize, hey, you're this guy that I have a history with. Now, the only thing notable about the C support is that Klein mentions the coup d'etat, which, spoilers, there is a coup d'etat later on in FE6 against the Truria, and I don't remember exactly when it kicks off. I want to say it's like chapter 13 or so, maybe a little bit later, but it's really not that important. But the funny thing about this is that you can get the support, I think, theoretically much earlier than that. So, it kind of spoils what's going to happen later in the story. I could be wrong. Maybe there is like the minimum support point requirement is going to take you like 3 chapters to get no matter what, but I just thought it was interesting. Now, the B support is where things get a little bit more fun, or a little bit more, meaty. The B support basically has Deke doing that same thing where he's like, kind of guiding Klein and helping him to make smarter choices, be a better fighter. and keep himself safe, basically. Klein kind of sees this as Deke babying him a little bit, and Deke doesn't deny it, although, as we've seen, he kind of just does this with everybody. So I definitely don't think it's a he sees Klein as a child. In fact, he actually kind of leans further into this and says, like, you'll always be little Master Klein in my eyes. And Klein kind of floats the idea of, like, hey, why don't you come back to my family, because they really miss you. They cared about you a lot. And Deke kind of shuts down the conversation and says, stop talking to a lowly mercenary like me. And that's the end of it. So the A support is where things get more interesting, and then also a little rocky. I don't know exactly how I feel about everything in here. But let's go ahead and unpack it a little bit. So, Klein, I don't know why he does this, but he basically just recounts the details of what happened in a very weird, awkward way. Explains explicitly to the audience what their relationship is. And then he proceeds to say that Pent hired Deke as a pit fighter, and the pit fighter, he's telling this story as if it's not Deke. He's talking about it like it's somebody else, just for context. So he says the pit fighter, fought for my father and, spread his name, but then eventually he bought his freedom and left, and I felt betrayed, but now I understand why you did it. And it's because you didn't want our family associating with a lowly mercenary pit fighter. And then Deke kind of chimes in and says, like, you guys were way too nice to me. And Klein counters, like, hey, we were worried about you. It's a little bit of a back and forth. And eventually Deke concedes and says, all right, I will come back and see you guys again. And I mean, Klein says you'll be with us like family again. So it seems like he's planning on just going full stop back to Etruria and just like being a part of Pent's family, which is a little weird. Kind of based though, honestly. I would want to be a member of Pent's family too. Now, nice here. I like Deke's character in this. It's definitely characterful of him to think, these guys are being so nice to me, this is going to hurt their reputation, and I care about them so much that I'm going to leave. I'm a little confused in a couple of places. So first of all, like Deke says, what does he say? Lord Pent and his wife raised me as if I were their real child, regardless of the complaints and finger pointing going on around them. So basically, people were complaining about how nicely they treated him, and he felt uncomfortable with that. He felt like they were putting themselves out too much for him. So he decided to leave. Now, the question I have is, if they cared about him like their own son, why did they have him fight in the arena? Why did they have him fight to the death with other gladiatorial pit fighters? I mean, I assume these battles were to the death. It's kind of described as like Roman gladiatorial combat, because there's a lion involved. So I don't know what the deal is there. And then there's this bit about Deke buying his freedom. And I mean, I don't know exactly what that means, but I mean, the implication, at least the one that I'm picking up, is that he was like a slave? ? I don't see why we'd have to, like, if he was just a servant for hire, I don't see why he couldn't just quit. Or like, if he was in servitude to the guys who ran the pit fighting arena and not Pent specifically, then why would Pent not just like buy him his freedom immediately? He's a noble, he has a shitload of money, so he could do that. And I get that I'm reading too deep into this generally pretty sweet, like this interaction between two people who care about each other very much, but I just can't help thinking, like, there's some stuff here that doesn't add up, and I don't really get it, but it's fine. It doesn't really matter. It's a good support overall. I like it, and I do think Deke is very consistently characterized as someone who is willing to always, take people under his wing, really help out and protect people. You know, he's a very protecting, caring person. And that is a common theme throughout all of his supports, except, I guess, arguably the Colorine one. But, you know, besides that. Okay. And with Deke done, we can move on to the final character of this episode, who is Shanna. Hoo boy! Shanna has a whopping 7 support partners. Let's quickly run through the ones that we've already seen. The Deke, Wade, and Lot supports, I think, are really good. And for Shanna's perspective, I think that they really characterize her well as being someone who's very sweet, very genuine, and who will she's very good at seeing through people's bullshit, especially, you know, and bringing a fresh new perspective that I think the other 3 find genuinely refreshing. But that's really all there is to say about them. I've already talked about them pretty extensively, so we can go ahead and just move on to the new stuff. Let's save Roy for last, because this is the first romantic Roy support, and we'll touch that later. We will move on instead to Zealot, who you know, we've already seen in the previous main episode. So the Zealot support is honestly really cute, and I like it a lot. So first of all, we should establish that Zealot is Shanna's brother-in-law. He is married to Shanna's older sister, Juno. And this support basically consists of her, like, bugging him for a bunch of personal details about their relationship. Like, how did you meet? How did you propose to her? You know, like, all of these things. And then in the A support, Zealot tries to turn it around. It's like, hey, are you interested in anybody? Do you have a boyfriend? And she's like, well, I'm not going to tell you that. And she leaves. And he's like, wait. Well, this seems like a double standard here. She keeps guilt tripping him into telling him things by saying, like, we're family, aren't we? And I can just picture in my head, like, there's one line in particular where she said, what were your proposal words? And Zealot says, you want me to tell you that much? And Shanna says, yes, I'm your family. And then there's, like, a pause, and she says, aren't I? And it just, in my head, I picture Shanna doing, like, the cute puppy dog eyes. And it's adorable, honestly. Again, I'm really just headcanoning the fuck out of these. But it's cute. I like this support a lot. And I think it's a good example of, like, how to write a good support without being overly heavy on the backstory. Because I think it's a really common criticism to say that a support is boring without really being able to articulate why. Because a support doesn't have to be filled to the brim with backstory to be interesting. You know, like, it helps for sure. I like learning more about these characters, and I guess we do learn a little bit here. I mean, we learn that that Shanna and Zealot are family, but other than that, we don't get a whole lot of like, there's no, like, tragic backstory here. There's no details about, like, why a character is the way they are. It's just 2 people having fun together and bouncing off of each other in a really fun and interesting way. And that's good enough for me. This is kind of like this sort of thing is what sets apart a support like this from what's a support that I've called boring. The like, all of Wolt's supports basically are just so boring because he's not really bouncing off any characters in an interesting way, except, like, Roy a little bit, I guess. It's just, you know, 2 people talking to each other. And I think, you know, you can if you want to be reductive, you can say, well, aren't all Fire Emblem supports just 2 people talking to each other? But I think if you read, like, the Walt Marcus support or the Walt Lance support, and then you read this one and you try to look at me and tell me that they're the same level of interesting, I mean, obviously you're entitled to your opinion, but I don't get it. I really don't. This is fun and I like it a lot. Now, next up, we have her 2 supports with her. Oh, I didn't go through her supports with all. I didn't go through all of her. I can't talk tonight, guys. I did not go through all of Shanna's support partners at the beginning like I usually do. So just real quick, it's the 3 we've already seen in the other characters this episode: Deke, Lot, and Wade. Roy, who we're going to talk about at the end, and then Zealot, who we just talked about, and then her 2 sisters, Thea, or Tate, and Juno. So now we're going to talk about Tate, who is the first one. This episode is going to be a bitch to edit. I'm realizing so many fucking stumbles. You guys are just going to have to put up with me on this one, I think. I when I do off-the-cuff videos like this, or episodes, I tend to stutter a lot more, and I kind of intend for these to just kind of be like quick little episodes to put out. So I'm probably not going to be super hard on myself for little mistakes. But yeah, anyway, tangent over. The Tate support is very funny, and very cute. I like it a lot. The Pegasus Sisters archetype is one that's existed for a very long time. It was in the original Fire Emblem game with Palla, Catria, and Est. And while they weren't fully fleshed out until Echoes, I think that they represent the, like, archetypical trio of sisters really well. Palla has a lot of anxiety and like emotional exhaustion from having to like take care of her sisters. Catria has really, really bad middle child syndrome. And Est is tired of being treated like a kid. And I think that those three are really the best that this archetype has ever been, at least as far as I can remember. And it's interesting to see how other games kind of tackle it and do things a little bit differently or a little bit similarly. Now, like I said, those, kind of character traits weren't firmly set in stone until Echoes. But I do think it's worth considering, like that just, like, you could write any trio of sisters and that would probably be like a good direction to take those characters, just like regardless of the context. That is a good way to write a trio of siblings, I would say. So I think my point with all of this is I am probably going to be, I wouldn't say like comparing it throughout, but I am going to be keeping in mind, Palla, Catria, and Est as like the template for these guys, and seeing where, they took inspiration and where they decided to deviate a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's literally exactly comparing. But it's interesting to think about, I guess, and that's the only real reason that I brought it up. But anyway, first off, we have Shanna and Tate is the first support between this trio, and it's pretty similar. It starts off pretty similarly to her other supports. She's being kind of lectured by her sister in a way kind of similar to Lot from her earlier support, but unlike Lot, she kind of like brushes Tate off and just kind of flies off. In the Beast support, something really cute happens. So Tate kind of continues her lecturing, and Shanna's kind of complaining that she's being mean, and then Tate tries to emulate Juno, who is their older sister, in a really cute way, where she like pats Shanna on the head, and Shanna is very taken aback by this, and she's like, well, that's what Juno tried to do. Did I like do it wrong? Did I mess it up? And Shanna says, did you hit your head? And Tate basically says, okay, fuck you. I tried. And then in the A support, Shanna tries to goad Tate a little bit by telling, she says, I love you, and then Tate doesn't say it back. Tate in general just seems to be a very reserved with her emotions kind of person. And so there's a fun little back and forth here where Shanna says, oh, you don't want to say it out loud. I guess you hate me. You've always hated me. Kind of similar to what she does with Wade. She likes to tease people. She likes to kind of like egg them on a little bit. But she means well, and she's doing it just to have some good fun. And it's cute. And I like this support a fair bit. Now, next up we have the Juno support, which is, these two are also sisters. So we'll see how that one kind of differs a little bit. A little bit of an anticlimactic note to end on, but the Juno support is just kind of cute. It's not groundbreaking or anything. It's, Juno's a nice older sister. She kind of dotes on Shanna a little bit, asks her how she's doing. Very much a motherly figure. And then the ace support, she tells Shanna that she has a baby. She had a baby with Zealot, and Shanna is like very excited about this and is like, "Where's the baby? I wanna hold her. I wanna carry her." And then Juno says, "I can't bring her to the battlefield, Shanna." And I mean, I think that she's completely right. I think it makes perfect sense why she wouldn't want to bring a child onto the battlefield. And I can't really think of what kind of mother would even think about bringing a child onto the battlefield. But I just figured it was worth mentioning. And then Shanna says, "Wait, then that makes me an aunt? But I'm still so young." And that's the end of the support. It's really nothing special, but it's funny. It's cute, I guess. Not really funny. They do mention the triangle attack, which I guess is supposed to be your hint that it exists. But, by the time you get the Shanna Juno support, B support no less, the game's going to be practically over. So it's not really worth it, I don't think. But I guess it's cool that it's in there. So yeah, that was the band of mercenaries and their support partners. Pretty good set of characters overall. I think Law is not really doing it for me, but the rest of them are good. Between Deke and Shanna, I mean, it's obviously going to be one of those two for my favorite. Oh, that's really tough. I like both of them a lot. I'm probably going to have to give it to Shanna, though. I'm stupid. I forgot to talk about Roy. All right, let me read this real quick. So, I'm glad that I remembered, for obvious reasons, because otherwise I would have to go back and re-record it. But honestly, I think this might, out of all the supports that I've read between this episode and the last one, I think this one might be my favorite so far. It is really good. It has a little bit of everything. It has great character building for both Roy and Shanna. It has some cute romance between two characters who are like, I mean, it's tough, right? Because Roy is 14 years old, which makes it really awkward to pair him with anybody, especially Cecilia, who is one of his romance options. But Shanna is also 14, so it works out pretty well. And they're cute together. They have a genuine chemistry. And I as much as any two characters can have genuine romantic chemistry in 3 conversations, but it's still something, right? It's good. So let me, that was the overview, but let me go through and just kind of like explain a little bit about, each level. So the C support is them kind of like bouncing off of each other. And Roy basically saying, you seem so carefree and laid back. And Shanna basically telling him to loosen up a little bit, and teaching him to have like a good mindset to get him through life. And I think Roy is obviously in a very stressful position. He's the leader of this big army, and has, gone through a lot. So I think that they really complement each other. Shanna being able to kind of get through to him and teach him a little bit about how to enjoy life more. It's cute. I like it a lot. And then the B support talks a little bit, we get some lore on Ilya. So apparently it's a rule for an Ilian mercenary that while you're in training, you need to basically work with a foreign mercenary group of some kind, or maybe even like an army, because you can pick up things from other cultures that you can't in Ilya. So she gives examples like foreign fighting styles, foreign culture, and of course money, which, is cool. It's a neat little tidbit about the Ilian mercenary business, basically. And it's cute that Roy is, because he asks like, "Are you sure that you can stay in this army for too long?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's no problem." And realizes that he's a little worried about her and feels happy about that. And then the A support is them talking about what they're going to do when the war's over. And Shanna says, "Well, I'm probably going to go back to Ilya," and Roy seems kind of disappointed. And Roy invites her back to Faerie, says you can stay as long as you want, and is very clearly like, I mean, maybe this is a bit crass, but I would say he's pretty clearly hitting on her. And Shanna, like, at the end of the support, is like, wait, is he? No, that can't be right. Maybe? It's cute. It's nice. It has just a nice, well-rounded support with a lot of fun details about the characters and the world. And I like it. I think it's a really good support. I might be biased because this playthrough I do plan to pair Roy and Shanna, but that doesn't really matter. Like, my pairings aren't going to be, they aren't really going to be talked about much, but doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah, so that's it for Shanna for real this time. And I definitely, with this one, that really cemented it. Shanna is definitely my favorite character this episode. She's really fun, has a great personality. I really like her interactions with all the other mercenaries, and Roy kind of teaching him to loosen up a little bit. It's neat. I like her, and I think that she's a good character in Fire Emblem: The Binding Blade. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Next time, for me, I'm literally going to record this episode, or at least part of this episode right now after I finish this one. But for you guys, it might be a couple of extra days. I'm going to be talking about the Knights of Ostia. So we're going to be doing Bors, Wendy, Barth, Uyghur, and then Lilina. So all the Ostia people, basically. And yeah, so that's going to be our first 5-character episode. Probably going to be a little bit longer than this one. I'm surprised at how long this one went. The last one was like 35 minutes, I think. So I'm a little bit surprised that this one went a full hour, but I guess these supports have a little bit more to chew on. But anyway, look forward to that coming out soon, and then hopefully the main episode will be out relatively soon as well, depending on when this one gets put out. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.